to the cloud. Thanks. All right. I want to honor everybody's time and get started because we have a hard stop in 58 minutes because Eric has a meeting, and I know that because I'm supposed to be there too. So I want to jump right into this and just say this has been one of the funnest projects I've ever been involved in. And that's because of Eric's creativity and what he brought to this process. And so I want to jump in as a play for Michael to the heat of the moment, Michael. Let's start at the beginning. Was there a moment when you placed this order for the printing for 5,000 books that you just realized, like, what have I done? Right? Was there a scary moment in this beginning?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there always is, but because you just never know with something like this. Like, 5,000 copies of a book, and by the way, nice copies. Like, we didn't just do like cheap print on demand stuff. Like, we wanted them to be high quality, and so they were costly. I think it was what, somewhere between 15 and 20 grand for us to print those 5,000 copies to give to everybody at FHL. And so it was an investment for sure. And you never know, like, is this even gonna convert into work later? Or is this gonna be worth it? Or are we gonna get an ROI from this? And you wonder about that. But I do think that, like, I was probably less stressed than I would have been otherwise, because we had done all this work on this book and I really felt like it was something really powerful, something good. And if you remember Nicole on our very first meeting, have you told them this story about how we
No, we're going to
got
back up
started with this
next and
book?
talk about the whole thing. But yeah, I just was, go ahead.
Well, you want me to tell the story?
Yeah, go for it.
So, as you guys know, Nicole is amazing. I talked to four, five, six different like publishing strategists to get going on this book. And when I had the idea to write a book, and this was before I was asked to speak at FHL, but I had this idea that I was like, I need to write a book. I think I got the ideas for it. I know what I need it to be. And I talked to a bunch of different people, and I posted on Facebook. I said, hey, I'm looking for somebody to help me write a book. I don't know what I'm doing. Can who's out there in my world that can help me? And talk to a bunch of different people. And Nicole very much, and Niche Pressworks, like, really stood out as like the standout, like, this is the option. And it was because of her ability to look at what I was trying to do and understand the strategy behind it. And that was so important to me. It's like, not just like I'm just going to write a book, but like, what is the purpose of this book? And she really helped me rethink, like, why am I writing this book? What am I trying to do with this? What do I want to have happen from it? And so if you're going to write a book, you got to have the strategy in mind, and what are we actually doing with this? And so, we sat down, we started talking about this book, and initially when we talked, and it was great, and I was like, okay, let's go, let's work together, let's talk about this. We sat down in our first meeting, and I pulled out all of these books on my shelf that I had gotten from other marketers and other entrepreneurs and other people, and I pulled them all out and I laid them all out and I showed them to Nicole, and I said, this is what we are not doing. And not to knock on other authors, like, everybody has their own style, but I was like, we are not doing this. I think there's a lot of books out there that are really, it at the heart of it, just a webinar transcript printed into a book. And it's just used as a cheap lead gen tool to just get people in the door, something you can give away for free and you can make it happen, which is a strategy, and that's great. But I was like, we're not doing that. I want to write what I told Nicole. I said, I want to write a real book. And I knew she was the one to help me write a real book. Something that actually had a lot of, like, tips and tricks in it, and tactics and everything, but then also a lot of heart to it. And there's a lot of passion that I have for what I do and how I help people, and I really wanted to make sure that that came through in the storytelling and everything like that. Of course, we had the opportunity to work with Michael, who helped with the stories, who were phenomenal, and but that was like the big push at the beginning, was like, let's make this something really special, something unique, something different. And that perspective went all the way through writing the book, and how we wrote the stories, and how we wrote the principles, and how we taught everything, all the way through. Like, Nicole really latched onto that idea. She's a creative like me, and that went through into the design of the book. And if you guys have seen the cover of the book, it's like a little bit crazy, a little bit unique, but that was intentional, was for it to be different, something new and something fresh. And
Wait.
went through the design, and even like how we printed the book. We looked for a printing provider that was going to do something really special with it and something nice with it. And I think, when we got to FHL and shared it with everybody, I think that one of the most fulfilling things for me was that it really came through for people. Like people had that moment with this book where it was, this is something different. This is something unique. And it's not just like your typical like speaker book that they put on every chair, but something that actually people want to really dive into and spend time with.
Okay. Yeah, you brought up a couple of fun memories. All right, so let's back up and talk about where you were in your business. So, Michael joined us at the very beginning. He was up here, and because Michael and I actually met you together in Boise at a mastermind event. And at that point, you didn't know you were speaking at Funnel Hacking Live. So, but we met through a ClickFunnels event, and you were telling a story that had that was popular, but then Russell picked up the phone and asked you to speak. Do you want to talk about like where was your business at that point? What was going on? And give everybody like a clue, like what do you even do?
Yeah. I'm very much like creative entrepreneur. Like I feel like I've been on both sides of the table as far as like being creative or being like business oriented. And for my whole life have been into content and social media and online sales and filmmaking and music and all these different like creative endeavors. And my very first business was on MySpace, if you guys remember the MySpace days. So I've been on social media for a long time. Was like day one on every social media platform, and I was doing graphic design at the time, and so I've been through graphic design and music and web development and filmmaking and all those kind of things, and then into internet marketing and online courses and coaching, and so had been through a lot of different things throughout my life. When we met, though, I was kind of at a I feel like there was like a pivotal point. It was where the momentum was starting to pick up with things. I had been asked to speak at Mastermind in Paradise, which is a mastermind event with all of Russell's top clients in Mexico, and it was the very first time that I was asked to come and speak and teach my framework on how I create content and everything, because I had created content every day for the last year up until that point, and it had worked really well, and Russell was really interested in the journey, and so I came and I spoke on stage and I taught what was going on. Um, and it's funny, I finished speaking on stage, taught the framework for the first time, came off stage. Russell was like, "That was amazing. We need to like work with you. We need to have you come and do some videos for us." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So he hired me to come out and shoot some videos for him. And then like a couple weeks later, he voxed me. He said, "Hey, we've got this inner circle event, which is the one that you were at. You and Michael also spoke at." Where he said, "Hey, I want you to come and teach that same framework that you taught in Mexico, also teach it to the inner circle." And so then I went and I taught that there. And and at this point, it was just kind of like some momentum was building. I didn't know what was going to happen from this. And then it was later after that I ended up working with Russell and then building up this business. And then he actually invited me to come speak at FHL. And Nicole and I had started talking because of that mastermind event about like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about writing a book. Like, could we do something like this? And then when Russell messaged me and said, "Hey, will you speak at FHL?" I think the next thing I did was call Nicole and say, "Okay, we have to write a book because if I'm going to be on stage in front of 5,000 people, I need a book." And that was how we got started.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because you're a video guy. And that was what was interesting. Like, you're standing on stage talking about the power of video and social media, and you're handing out your book. Like, why was the book key to your next level and to this moment on stage?
At FHL.
Yeah. And in
Yeah.
general, like, why write a book when you're a video guy?
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody asked me that yesterday. And they're like, "Oh, it's so interesting that you're in like media and digital and video, but then like you wrote a book." And I was like, "Oh, well, I never really thought about it that way." But um, my perspective on it is this. In fact, I think Nicole talks about this a lot of times. It's hard to like be an expert in an industry if you don't have a book. It's it's almost like the book is what solidifies you as an expert, as somebody that people can listen to. It's an opportunity for you to take all of your ideas and your unique processes and frameworks and how you think about things and your point of view and your stories and everything, and just to compile it into something that someone can consume very easily and simply, that they can pull out and they can understand very clearly what it is you do and how you're unique and different. Which doesn't really come across as well on social media. If it's a 60-second video, you're only getting like a little piece of it there. Or if you watch the next video, and that's only a little bit a piece of it. Potentially, if people get into an online course or a program with you, they can start to get more of the whole picture and start to understand you. But a book is so powerful at not only teaching your entire framework, but letting a reader get to know you and who you are, and what your beliefs are, what your values are, what you care about, and to decide whether they align with you. And so it's such a interesting medium for that. And I really do think that, I probably didn't fully understand that when we got started with the process, but I did know that, hey, if I'm going to be on stage in front of 5,000 people and I'm going to have an opportunity there, if you guys ever been to FHL or the rules, like nobody's allowed to pitch. So you're not allowed to pitch anything. There's no lead magnets. There's no lead generation happening at that event. Like you can't ask people to go join your email list or anything like that. But there are some like sneaky ways that you can kind of get around those guardrails, right? So that you can gain some attention from it. Now, and so there were some things that I did in my presentation there, but printing the book was the biggest opportunity. Is if I can be in front of 5,000 people and I have to pay out of pocket for it, but if I can put a book on every single chair, that means that 5,000 people are going to have that experience through that book of getting to know me and understanding me and understanding my framework and my processes and what I do on a much deeper level than they would if they just simply listened to me speak for 20 minutes, right? And so um it was really powerful in that regard, like that ability to like really connect with the audience on a deeper level than I would have been able to just by speaking.
Yeah, Dina's on this call. Dina's one of our coaches. She's the mindset coach. And Dina had said before she had a book, she really wasn't looking, and forgive me, Dina, if I get this wrong, but she wasn't really thinking about doing a book. And then someone approached her and talked about what a disservice it is to your audience if they want more from you and you don't have more to give them. Right?
Mm,
I think one of the biggest challenges, because when we met at that point, you weren't a candidate for speaking at FHL, and then I think you reached out to me because I'm like, hey, are we gonna, we want to talk about the book, and you're like, I might be speaking. I'm like, if you speak, you need a book, and one of the things that we talked about was the challenge you had is you were day one speaker of a 4 day of event with over 20 speakers, right? And yet you walked out of there at that end of that 4 days as one of the most memorable. Like there's been what, three other FHL events, and every time your name still comes up, and every time it does, you get a spike in everything. Uh, so you want to talk about that? You remember that?
yeah. Um, they asked me to speak. They sent me the schedule and I was like day one, like basically the first speaker. Outside of like Russell and Todd, they do their thing in the morning, and then I think there was one other speaker and then me, which to me that was a huge advantage. I knew because when I spoke at Mastermind in Paradise, I was on almost the last day. So that was a 4 day, 5 day event, and I was the evening of day four. And so it was interesting because the whole event, I was at this resort with everybody. Nobody knew who I was. Like it was just completely just walk past people, whatever, nothing. And then you go day one, day two, day three, day four. I was just an attendee. Day four at night, I spoke on stage. I taught this framework. People loved it. And then all day, day five, the last day, I couldn't get anywhere in the resort. Like it would take me an hour to get from one side of the resort to the other side of the resort because everybody was stopping and talking and asking questions and wanted to know more and wanted to have that experience. And so it was so cool just like talking to everybody, but it was also like, man, like how many more opportunities would I have to talk to people and to get to know people and like build my network if I was on day one, right? And so then when FHL came around, they said, we want you to speak on day one. And I was like, that is awesome, right? Because now I get to spend the entire event with people already knowing my message and wanting to ask questions and wanting to get to know me, which is an opportunity to, build my network and meet more people and then hopefully, turn turn them into a bigger community and more clients and everything like that. And so I got on, I spoke. It was also really nice for just not having to stress about it all week. Like I just got there, did my speech, and then got to enjoy the rest of the event. So I did get on, I spoke, got on stage. We did some things with the book on stage because, and this was Nicole's idea. She was like, if you're going to be on stage, you got to get a picture of you holding the book up and everybody in the audience also holding the book up, which those photos are phenomenal. And so we did a thing where I said, hey, everybody, like pick up your book. And then we talked about like, this is your guidebook and everything. And so we got those photos and this video of everybody doing that. Because Nicole was really good about thinking through the content and like what to do with this and make sure that you get every angle and everything like that. And so we did that, and I spoke, and it's really interesting. I got done speaking, and when you're speaking, you just never really know like how it came across or how the audience perceived it or how well it went. Um, and I came off stage and I was like, I think I did a really good job. Like I felt really good about it, and I was excited and happy. Came off stage, finished up, wrapped everything up backstage with Russell, and then we went out in the hallway, and the hallway was just kind of dead, and there were a few people walking around, but like the session wasn't out yet. And I remember I was back there. They wanted me to. They did a quick interview with me and asked me some questions and stuff. And then I was hanging out with a few friends, and I remember Ben Hardy was back there, and so we were talking and everything. And then slowly, when the session got out and people started coming out into the hallways, it was like this bombardment. It was like crazy. Okay, where one person came up and said, "Oh man, I really enjoyed your talk. Like, we talked. Can you sign my book?" Like, okay, cool. And then the next person came up, like, "Hey, will you sign my book?" And then the next person came up, "Hey, will you sign my book?" And asking questions. And the next person. Next thing you know, there's a line of like 10 or 20 people just waiting just to talk to me. And and they all had my book, and they all wanted it signed. And they all wanted to ask me a question about it and about my framework and how it would work for them and everything like this. And there was this excitement around it that was just so fun. And I don't know that I would have had that without the book. It was the book that took the experience on stage, the speech, the talk, which was like, here's some tips and tricks. And people were like, okay, cool. But it took that and it solidified it into a tangible product that they were now holding in their hands. And in a way that they felt like there's this connection that you have with the speaker when you're holding their book. And the fact that they all came up and they wanted their book signed and they wanted to talk about it and they wanted to open up to a page and say like, what do you think about this? And everything like that was just phenomenal. And the ripple effect, that was when the ripple effect started to happen. In fact, there's a really funny story. At FHL when I went, so we had 5,000 copies of this book. They're all in boxes, backstage behind in this separate room next to the ballroom. And so you have all these boxes of the books. Before the event, they have the event staff that goes and puts them out on every single chair, and they go and do that before we speak. And they told me, they said, "Hey, just so you know, like you need to print 5,000 copies. There's gonna be 5,000 people there, but you're gonna have probably about 500 copies left over." Because what happens normally is that people leave them on their chairs, or like not everybody takes them. And I was like, okay, that's fine, totally cool. I needed, a few extra copies to give to clients, and I needed to give one to my mom, and I needed a few copies, and I was like, that's totally fine. So we went did the thing. They put them on all the chairs. I got up on stage. I spoke. After I spoke, and after I talked to everybody in the hall, I went to the back of the room to the event staff, and I said, okay, I'm here to pick up the extra copies of the book. Where are they? And they looked at me and they were like, uh, they're gone. Like the books are gone, completely gone. And I was like, what do you mean they're gone? You told me there's going to be extras. Like, where are they? No, they're gone. Like people were going crazy. And they were taking multiple copies. They're coming to the back of the room. They were getting more copies to give to like clients and friends. Then I was like, they can't be gone. I need a book to give to my mom. I need some extra copies for these. And they're like, no, they're gone. Like, sorry, I don't know what to do right now. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is crazy. I was like, are they really, really gone? And they said, well, you know what? There might be a box somewhere. Like we can go look. And so we went back and we scoured the hotel. We went to all these rooms and like tried to find and see if we could find just anything that was left over. And we ended up finding one box of books left over. I took that box, I gave it to them, and I said, don't give these to anybody. These are mine. Nobody can have more books. These are my books, and I need them to do things with them. And so, so we got the extra copy of the books. It's actually funny. If you guys ever been to FHL, like after the event, everybody comes out in the hall, and a lot of times they have like other speakers' books out there and stuff. The end of the event staff was out there, standing in the middle of the hallway in this stream of people, handing out the other speakers' books, just trying to get rid of them because they had so many copies left over. And it's not to knock on the other speakers, but kind of to knock on them a little bit. But they're trying to get these books out and trying to get them away. Meanwhile, my book, like you can't find another copy of it. Like it's completely gone. And I think that that was like the first indicator to me, like, okay, there's something special here, which is, felt so good because, like I told you earlier, the mission from the very beginning with Nicole was like, we're going to do something different. We're going to do something that stands out, that's going to grab people's attention, that's going to make people want to get into it, that's going to make people want to make things happen. And that was like the first indicator when the books like disappeared completely. I was like, I think we did it. I think we figured it out. I think we did something really special, really unique here that wasn't just another book. Now, I didn't know for sure because, the event ends and everybody's traveling home and everything, and it was just kinda, like, quiet for a little bit. I didn't really know, like, what's happening, like, was there any impact? Did anybody care about this book? And then it was, like, a day or 2 later when I started getting messages from people, like, "Oh my gosh, I read your entire book on the flight home. I could not put it down. I couldn't stop reading it. I just opened it up just to check it out. I couldn't put it down. I ended up reading the entire thing on the flight home." Or, "You have no idea how much this book just impacted me. Like, the stories in here are just absolutely amazing. The way you wrote it is incredible. Um, where can I learn more? How can I make this happen?" And I started to get this flood of messages and DMs and emails and people just wanting to know more about the book and how they could work together, and people started posting about it on social media, like, they're making videos doing book reviews. I had people reaching out to me and saying, like, like, "Hey, I've got a book club and I wanna, you know, share your book in my book club and have everybody in this group read it." And I was like, "What is going on? Like, what is happening right now?" And it just turned into this ripple effect, this snowball that just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it went from, all the people that were at the event that were freaking out about the book and tell me about it, to then I started getting messages from, "Hey, some so and so let me borrow your book, and I read it, and I've been so impacted by it. And so told me about your book, and this happened, and whatever." And so then it started expanding to these people who didn't have a copy of the book that were talking about it, and who had borrowed one from their friend, and different things like that. Meanwhile, all of this is happening, and you can't get the book on Amazon. You can't buy it online, like, the book wasn't even done yet. I just, like, made an advanced reader copy so that I could give it out to everybody at FHL. So it wasn't even finished yet, and I started getting messages and messages from people like, "Where can I get your book?" If you looked at, Amazon, you type in Eric Thayne, it comes up, Eric Thayne, Create, Don't Capture. So people are searching for it, they're Googling it, they're trying to find this book, and it's not available. Um, and in the meantime, I'm going, "Well, yeah, we need to finish this book," but it wasn't quite done yet, and it took me a little bit of time to kinda get it ready to actually launch. But watching that ripple effect was insane. And, even today, it's been about a year and a half since then, now that we're finally launching the book. Um, I get a message almost every day from somebody asking me where they can get the book. Um, just, and a year and a half later, just from that one event. And now we're obviously, finally gonna launch it and people will be able to get access to it. They haven't been able to, and I've just been telling people, like, "Join the wait list, join the wait list." We have thousands of people on the wait list, like, waiting for this book, waiting for it to happen. And all of that happened because of a book. I could have I could have got up on stage and just gave a presentation and taught, "Here's my framework, here's how to do this," and probably people would be like, "Oh, that was so good, that was great. I'm gonna go do it." But to have the stage presentation convert into a snowball, into a ripple effect that built and turned into more and more people, where this movement started spreading, where people were getting inspired, where people are learning from it, where we're getting this wait list built up, where people are joining the wait list and wanting to know more about the book, where we got people into our programs. We started working with clients and we started launching, programs and courses and everything to help them out. And these things just started snowballing and growing and growing and growing. All of that happened, or I don't think that that would have happened that same way without a book. Because like I said, it was the book that took just a simple stage presentation and turned it into something tangible, an experience that each individual person in that room could have with me one on one, but for me in a one to many fashion. And I think that's really like the power of not just writing a book, but writing a good book. Writing something that's like that you put a lot of effort into, that you really care about. This is not just like an AI generated. This was before ChatGPT. Not an AI generated, whatever, just throw it out there, but like how can I really put my ideas and my stories into something that's gonna last forever and that will continue to grow from now until the end of my life and then even beyond that.
Yeah. So we've got on this group like several people that have a book, right? But we also have several people. We've got a challenge coming up where we're going to do a 5 week challenge to help people plan their book. So I want to dive into just a little bit about the writing process because for you, we were on a very short timeline, which honestly for me was fun because I got to get my hands in the project with you. And Michael Haig, we brought in Michael Haig right away. So one of the there's two questions I have for you, and you just touched on one, which was AI could never have written this book, right? And I know there are a lot of people out there telling you can use AI to write a book, but the stories are what make it so rich. So, and that's where Michael really helped out. But the stories in your book are phenomenal. You want to talk about that at all? That experience of like writing it quickly, because it
Yeah,
was right here.
absolutely.
Michael wants to know how he can beat your 3 weeks, because I had never told anybody how quickly we actually got that book done. I kept that quiet because number one, it's not really great. We don't recommend this because, like you said, we got the book done. The book was complete. It wasn't like half the chapters were incomplete. The book was complete. You could have launched it then, but kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
talk about that, would you?
Yeah, so 3 weeks, and that was to write it, and then honestly, like, rewrite it. Remember, we kinda started over from scratch at one point,
Yeah.
and just started over because it just wasn't coming out the way that I wanted it to, and, there were a lot of late nights. Poor Nicole was, like, up with me till 1 AM, like, she was in the middle of planning her daughter's wedding at the time, and so we're, like, working until, like, 5 PM. She's like, "I gotta go work with my daughter," so she'd go spend a few hours working with her daughter to plan her wedding, and then she would come get back on Zoom with me, and, not to, like, set the expectation that she's gonna do that for everybody,
Please.
but I will say that, like, Nicole does have a habit of doing whatever it takes to make things happen, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's been so amazing working with her. Um, w it was just this crazy process, a lot of late nights, reminded me of my college days, just staying up all night writing, getting this thing going, and, it was a huge burden, but it was worth it. And we went through that process, and so I went through, and Nicole gave me the strategy and the outline for the chapters, and here's how you need to do it and everything like that, which was so helpful because I knew what I wanted to write, but I didn't know exactly necessarily how to structure it. And to have that strategy of like, here's what to do and here's how to write it really good, then all I had to do is it really is like, this is why I was able to do it in 3 weeks. All I had to do is fill in the blank. It was like, okay, chapter one, you need to talk about, you need a story for this and you need to teach these principles. And I was like, okay, there you go. And then chapter two needs to be this, and chapter three needs to be this. And so we went through that process and we got it all done, and I wrote it to the best of my ability. I wrote the stories, I wrote the ideas, and this was, like I said, this was pre ChatGPT. So I think nowadays, if you're writing anything and you're not using AI as a tool to help you to get something done faster or to make it better, I think that's a bad idea. You should be using that, but to let there's a difference between using it as a tool to help you versus just telling it to write it for you. And if you're just going to tell it to write it for you, it's going to flop. Like it's just not going to work. It's going to be generic and not going to have the same effect. But if you use it as a tool to help you to write better or to write more or to write faster, that's powerful. I didn't really have that option back then. And so
Yeah.
we started writing the book, kind of got the first copies out, and just I got into flow and just started writing and writing and writing and writing. All these principles got them in there, wrote the stories. And then yeah, once I had a good first draft of it, that's when we sat down with Michael. And Michael, you'll remember that that we sat down. I was like, I got these stories, and Nicole's like, I think you should talk to Michael about these stories. And I was like, well, do I really need to? Like, I think they're really good. And I sat down with Michael, and he looked at the stories, and he was like, no, I think there's some changes we can make here. And if you guys know Michael, like he's a genius. He's brilliant when it comes to how to craft the story. Like it's not just writing a story, but it's crafting it in an emotionally impactful way. And he helped me see a few different ways. He talked through. He said, "Well, what was he would ask me questions like this part of the story that happens here. What was the reason for that? What was the actual internal motivating factor? And like what was really inside of you and what was making things happen?" And he went deep with me on these stories and why they were such so important to me and why we're using those stories to teach these principles. And just going through that process made the stories so much more powerful and emotionally impactful. And we worked specifically on a couple of the stories where we went deep on those. And then I took the principles that he taught me through that process because I learned so much working with him. And then I applied those to the other stories. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do these same things to try to make them as good as I can. And it's funny, last week I actually sat down with my book and I opened it up and I just kind of started thumbing through the pages, and then something caught my eye and I started reading it. And I think it's funny to like go read your own stuff, but like when you haven't looked at something in a while and then you come back to it and you just like you're like, "Oh, I forgot that I wrote about this and I forgot this story and this is in here." And I started reading it. And when you come back to something like that, you can kind of come to it with a fresh pair of eyes. Where when you're in the middle of writing it, it's just like you can't even see the forest through the trees. And then you come back to it and you kind of read it almost like a consumer, like an audience member, like reading your book, a reader. And I started reading these books, and I could feel reading it through these stories just because people had told me, they said, I love how you taught the principles through stories. And when they said that, I was like, oh, did I do that? Oh yeah, I guess I did. Coming back to it and reading it, I felt that like, wow, these stories really do give it this emotional impact and this understanding of these principles. It's so much deeper than just a layer of here's what to do and here's how to do it. And I do think that storytelling is such a huge important part of it. I mean, every story, every chapter in that book has multiple stories in it, and obviously working with Michael made those better and helped get those to the point that they did. But at the end of the day, I think that was a big part of what made this book so special was having these stories that teach the principle rather than just telling people what to think.
Yeah. So Dina just asked a question, which is exactly where I wanted to go, which she said, can you give an example? I want to back up on that first because when we met at that mastermind in, which was April, by the way. So we met, I think, in April or March in Boise, and with Michael was in the room. Michael spoke about storytelling, and somebody in the room at that point, AI was around because they were using it because there was a doctor in the room. Michael spoke for 20 minutes, and the doctor pulled up and he said, Michael, he said, I don't mean to be offensive. He said, but why would I need to pay you as a coach? Because I just use ChatGPT and I just put in here, write me a story about blank, and using Michael Haig's 6-story framework. And he held it up and he goes, here's my story. Why would I pay you to be a coach? And Michael, I've written about this as a blog. So, Michael just looked there dumbfounded, like, I don't know. Like any of us, if any of you are a coach or anything that you do, and you're like, if a client comes to you and they say, hey, why do I need you? I got ChatGPT. And I immediately knew the answer. And I said, because I've worked with Michael long enough, I said, can I answer it? And I said, it's because you're presuming you just asked AI that to tell the right story. And I said, what I see when people talk with Michael and what Michael coaches them is they're either telling the wrong story altogether. So you're feeding bad data into AI, or you're missing the key emotional point. And so to Dina's question, which was an example, I'd love for you, what we discovered, the opening story of your book was the red sweater story. And it's such a bummer because most of you haven't read this book, and you're going to get a chance to find out in a little bit, like how you're going to finally get a copy of this book. So, but the red sweater story, you had been telling, like, well, it took us a while to dig that would be the opening story. That was your origin story. And then, but it was when we switched to working with Michael that Michael said, you're missing the key emotional point. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So the red sweater story, in fact, the whole, when you're teaching principles, like often you'll start with an origin story, which is, and most books will start with an origin story, which is how I came to understand the principle that this book is about. And prior to working with Michael and Nicole, I had this idea that, based on my presentation that I gave at Mastermind in Paradise and then gave at FHL, there was a story that I told about how I had blown up on social media, right? And how I'd created content every single day. And I thought, what, that's got to be that's the origin story, right? Of how my business crashed because I was running ads, and then I started making videos every day on social media, and then it blew up and it completely revolutionized my business. And that's the origin story. And honestly, if I was writing like a webinar transcript in a book, that probably would have been the story. And it would have been great. And it's very tactical and very, that would have been it. But because this book was not just a webinar transcript in a book, and there was more to it than that, um, Michael really helped me discover, well, Michael and Nicole helped me discover that, like, Eric, that's not the story. So that story is actually in chapter 4 now, right? So it comes later, and it's an important story and needs to be in there, but it teaches a different principle than it teaches the principle of like how to grow a social media, but that wasn't the point of the book, right? The book wasn't a how-to guide on social media. If it was just that, like literally there's a million people on planet Earth that could have written that book. But it needed to have that because it needed some tactical advice for people who wanted to do that. But there was more to it. And the title of the book really tells the story more so of what this book is really about. You can see it in the sign back here behind me. It's kind of blurry, but it says "Create, Don't Capture." The book's back there. That was the name of the book, and that was the name of the book from the very beginning. It was like, this has got to be the name of the book. And so they started working with me and asking, like, well, where does that principle come from? What is create, don't capture? How did you come up with that idea? And we started talking about that. And I was at first I was a little bit hesitant to include that story because it was from back before I was in the internet marketing days, or I was in the online course space, or I was in social media and content creation, like in what I'm doing now. It was long before that. And and so I was like, well, it's not really related to it, but they helped me see that like the principle and what I learned in that moment was what fueled everything that I'm doing now. And that's why it was such an emotionally impactful and powerful story. Do you want me to tell the story?
We've got, yeah, if you give us the short version.
The short
Michael
version?
would love to hear it again too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will see if I can remember the story. um, the the um the principle of create don't capture actually came from back when I was a filmmaker. And for a lot of years I was creating I was in filmmaking and I was a videographer and I was trying to create content for brands and trying to make videos and everything. And it was a little bit of a struggle like at first, you know, figuring that out, which I think it is for a lot of creatives, like trying to figure out the business side of that and how to make that happen. And I had this really deep desire to, you know, I was creating a lot of like video content, like shooting people's weddings or shooting like an event video for a client. But I had this desire to shoot like, I was like, if I'm going to make this art or make these videos, I want to do like really high end stuff. I want to do like these beautiful, like Super Bowl style commercials, like this type of stuff that you see, like it's really artistic and everything. That's what I really wanted, like inside of me, was to be able to do that kind of stuff. And I had a friend who had worked on some of those types of commercials. And luckily I reconnected with him and we went to lunch and we started talking about it. And I was asking him, I was like, I'm doing like all this video content stuff. And I really don't, you know, I'm not happy doing that. What I really want to do is the type of stuff that you do. How do I make that happen? And that was where the principle of create, don't capture came from. And he kind of taught me the basics of that principle and understanding that what happened, the reason it's called the red sweater story is because he showed me, pulled up one of these commercials that he had done. And it was a commercial for Visa. And it had this, it was a, it was an ice skating rink, like out on a frozen lake with this beautiful mountain backdrop. And this ice skating rink, there was this little boy skating around the ice skating rink in this red sweater, this beautiful red sweater. And he's skating around. And you know, there's like Olympics commercials where it's like the kid skating around and he skates and he hits the puck into the goal. And then it comes up like Visa, like we support you or whatever, like that. You know, proud sponsor of the 20 whatever Olympics. And so it was this commercial that they had done. And I was like, that's amazing. Like it's so striking, this commercial. And I was like, what is it about this? Like, how do you do something like this? And he goes, you know, uh, well, is there anything in this commercial that you notice that stands out to you? And I was like, well, the red of the sweater on that backdrop of this like snowy landscape was really striking. And he starts telling me a little bit of the background of how they pulled this together, this commercial. And he's like, we didn't just show up at an ice skating rink and turn on a camera and hit record. This was all very planned out. We actually brought crews out and we went on a frozen lake and we cleared out all of the snow and created an ice skating rink on a lake. We poured water on it and smoothed it out and made it so that it was actually skatable. We brought in this goal. We got permission, you know, from the county to be able to use the location in the first place. We went in, we did all these things to make sure that everything was exactly according to the artist's vision of what we wanted to create. And there was one detail about it that he told me about that just blew my mind. And he says that sweater that he's wearing, that sweater cost $1,000 for a sweater. We bought it from Sweden, I think.
Mhm.
And and I was like, why would you spend $1,000 on a sweater? And he's like, the director had a vision for what he wanted to create, and there were no compromises. He was going to create that vision no matter what. He had this idea. And so they bought the sweater. They paid $1,000 and they had that sweater shipped to them so that he could have that sweater. And when he started telling me the story and explaining this, I started to understand the idea of create, don't capture. And I created this, it was this idea that I took with me as I was coaching filmmakers and I was working with people, that a videographer simply captures the world as it is, but a cinematographer, a real filmmaker, creates a world. Everything is calculated and clear, and there's a vision for what they want to do. And at first, that was a principle that I taught to my filmmakers, and because it was a principle that I took with me I started applying that to my work, and then I actually did break into that industry of shooting really high-end commercials and got all these amazing gigs all over the world, and it was incredible. But it was all because of that idea of thinking about how can I create something rather than just simply capturing. And when I was a filmmaker, that was applied to filmmaking, but then I started to realize that this isn't just a filmmaking principle. This is a life principle. This applies to content. It applies to entrepreneurship and everything. When you go into whatever it is that you do, whatever your craft is, whatever your art is, whatever you do for people, and I'm not just talking about photography or filmmaking or anything like that. If you're an entrepreneur, your business is your craft, or what you do in your business is your craft. Whatever that thing is that you do, when you go into it with intention, when you go into it with a desire to create, to build something, to intentionally build from a place that comes from within, with what you want to share with people, the message, the purpose, the mission that you have about it, versus just simply going through the motions and following the tactics and the trends and the strategies that everybody is telling you to do, that's when you will see success. And I took that principle and taught that in the book in terms of entrepreneurship and business and content creation, and how the whole entire principle of the book, the whole purpose wasn't just here's how to make content. It was here's how to actually put something meaningful in the world. Here's how to do something amazing. Here's how to build what's inside you, how to share your message with the world, how to do it in an impactful way, and how that applies to being a creator, creating content, putting your message out there, showing up on camera, monetizing it, turning it into a business. Because ultimately, when you can do that, that's what makes it powerful. That's what makes you unique. That's what makes people gravitate towards you rather than just being, another person on the internet, another talking head, another content creator, just like everybody else, regurgitating the same ideas and just making up the same stuff. That's what makes you unique. That's what makes people gravitate towards you. That's what makes people want to join your tribe. So there you go. That's the story.
So Corey's added a couple of nice comments about that, and I want to hone in on it. The first thing, what I really enjoyed about us working together was um, the craft of the book was so critical to you and to me. I had an author years ago that when she was working with me, she called me the Energizer Bunny because a lot of times I won't give up before the client will. Like the client will be like, "It's good enough, the cover's good enough," and I'm like, "No," tweaking on the back end, going, "It's not quite right. We're still fixing this." And like it was so fun to be able to work with you at that level, and because a lot of times our editors get to work with our authors at that level, and so with this project on the short timeline that I got to. Now, what you just told of that story was the story about create, don't capture. And then what Michael brought to that you didn't highlight here was the backstory, which was you had just gotten a letter from the IRS. And so that's
Yeah.
the piece that he brought in that brought the emotion, right? And you want to share a little, like, share that part of it because that's where Michael's gold showed up. Like, there's so many fine
Yeah.
tuning things that we did in this book that out from the outsider, from the outside, people wouldn't understand all the nuances of what happened because we were able to fine tune it in these crazy 3 weeks. But that's a good example of it.
I think a good story and good storytelling and good story writing comes from understanding the character's pain. Understanding what is it that drives this character. And if you watch the best movies in the world, uh, you'll see that they even if they don't show it on camera, they've still the story writers have to know what that is. They got to know what's driving this person because that's ultimately how we relate to people is understanding like our pain and our and what's driving us and that's what Michael helped me figure out. So I told the story, I guess, kind of surface level, but then he came in and he said, "What was actually driving you? Why did you want that? Why did you want to create those types of films? What was the desire? What was really driving you?" And I probably came up with some surface level answers like, "Oh, I just wanted to make money or whatever." And he's like, "No, no, no, let's go deeper. Like, what was it really driving you? What was actually going on there?" And the reality is, and this is where the story goes a little bit deeper, is that I was in a position where I was newly married. My business was failing. I was trying to be an artist. I wasn't successful. My wife was supporting us by working full time. And I had just gotten a letter from the IRS saying that I owed $7,000. And that $7,000 back then to me was literally everything I had in my bank account. It was gone. And I sat on the couch. Actually, this was just before we got married. We were engaged on the couch at my fiance's house with my laptop in my hands, looking at that letter, just on the verge of tears. Just didn't know what I was going to do. And that $7,000 and losing everything and everything was not, it wasn't just the money to me. It was my reputation. It was my desire to build something and failing at it. It was letting down my fiance who I was about to get married to. It was worrying about like my father-in-law, like what did he think about his daughter marrying somebody who is just a broken artist, struggling and starving, and all these things that were going through my head that I was trying to figure out, that ultimately was the thing that was driving me to figure this out, to make it happen. And luckily, my wife is amazing, and she was just ultra supportive and said, you know what, like I'll keep working, I'll keep making it happen, I'll keep make sure that we're surviving so that you could build this dream of yours to do this. And that was what ultimately, it was that moment that ultimately led me to reaching out to my friend and going like, basically in a last ditch attempt to figure this out, and to talk to him and say like, look, I'm struggling, I don't know what's going on, what do I do? How did you do it? How did you figure this out? How did you get to a point where you could, make good money at this, but also create the art that you wanted to? And that was kind of like, that was the pivotal moment that drove me to do that. And that became the impetus for everything that happened, was right from there.
I don't know if all of you are watching Michael's face, but he's the proud father. I don't know if you have to understand, like our team is so proud of our clients' books when they're done. My guarantee to our authors, you're going to be really proud of your book when you're done with our process. It's a craft to us, and Michael is just glowing. Yeah, because Eric, I wish we had time to pull Michael up and go deeper on that. But let's talk about the aftermath, to use Michael's terms. Like what's happened and where you headed, because let's talk about what you're doing next, and where
Yeah.
but you've spoken. I want to build that gap. So it's been a year and a half. So where you been hiding, Eric? Why has the book not come out? And what's their plans? And what
Yeah,
happened?
it's interesting. It's been a year and a half since I launched like the first version of the book. And honestly, like in another life, I probably wish that I would have been able to get it out sooner and capitalize on that momentum and everything there. But I do also think that um, I think a lot of marketers fail because they're always trying to suck every dollar out of their market and always trying to capitalize on the momentum. And if I could teach somebody like a principle from this, something that I've learned is that there's a lot of value in allowing for demand to build for something. There's a lot of value in not always having everything ready all the time. We talked about earlier, Nicole mentioned like you got to have a next thing for your clients. And yes, if you do want to capitalize on making more money from your business and everything, like there is that. But there's also another side of it that's like people want what they can't have in a way, right? And people wanted this book and they couldn't have it, and now they want it even more because there's no way to get it. And so while I kind of do wish that we would have been able to get it out earlier, the reality is that that's not what happened, and so it's in the past. um but there's been a lot of value that's come from just like delaying it. And the reason that I delayed it is because it just wasn't quite done yet. Well, two things. Number one is it wasn't quite done yet. There's still some work that needed to be done on it. It needed to be fixed. I added about 5,000 new words to the book. I added new graphics and doodles and restructured some of the chapters and stuff, and got it to a place where it really like had the most up to date, most important information in it. And so that was one reason. And the second reason was, I'm also new to this, like the whole uh, getting a book out there. And I also, sometimes when you're an artist, when you're a creator, when you're an artistic type, you tend to be a perfectionist. And I think there was a lot of perfectionism that crept in for me, wanting to make this big book perfect and get it just right and get the launch right. And there were some things that I wanted to do that made it take a lot longer than what I would have expected. However, what that means is that the book now just took a year and a half to get out. But now there's a lot of demand for it. There's a lot of people on the list, and we're going to do a big launch of it. And it's also a book that I'm extremely proud of now. And so it's something that I can get up on stage on Friday and I'll be able to talk about with extreme confidence, with full conviction that this is the best thing that I've ever done, the most amazing piece of work that I've created. I put everything into it. I put a lot of money into it. I put my health into it. Everything's gone into it, and to be able to produce a product, your craft, an art, something that you've done that you really feel like you've put everything into to make it amazing, that turns into a very different selling experience than I just need to get something out there in order to make money. And so there's a lot of power in that. And that's what I've been working on, for the last year and a half and getting it somewhere where it really just like I can feel excited about this launch. I can feel like this is going to be the best thing ever because I know what it's going to do for people. I know the impact it's going to have. I know what's going to happen, and that's more powerful than anything. So I'm just really excited about it.
I do want to add to that. When you say the book wasn't done, I think what was fascinating was, and we didn't have time to go into this, you were at a pivot point in your brand where everybody knew you as the short form video guy. But what you wanted to have was this conversation that was much bigger about becoming a creator. And so
Mhm.
that's the strategy behind the book. Was the first half of the book, or actually the whole book, delivered on what people wanted, they knew they wanted, which was, how does Eric do his short form video strategy? But it gave you a chance to step into the next level of your brand.
Yep.
And when I coach clients, that's what I say. Like when you write, like people don't understand what we're doing here when we work with authors is most authors, they'll work on a book on their own and they write the book like looking backwards and from where they are now. And they write the book for where they are now. And what we're doing with our authors is we're saying, where are you headed? What brand do you want? Like, what do you want to stand for the next 3 to 5 years? And we want to craft the book to that brand. And so that's what our experience is all about. And so we only had 3 weeks to stretch you on that. So we got that core message in there. But then you came back from FHL, you took a break. Like it didn't take you a year and a half to finish it. I think you actually, when you sat down and finished it, but it took you a while. Like that's why we don't rush writing books with our authors is um, we want you to have some time to really process your ideas. And so that's what you got a chance to do is say, okay, now how do I think more about this brand that I'm building? Because you got thrust into it really quickly. And you want to speak on that before we have to go?
Yeah, I will. I forgot that you had said that when we started working on it, and you're right. That was what probably made it so amazing. Is not writing the book from backwards, but writing it forward. Thinking about your future self. Where are you going? Where is this book taking me? Versus just kind of documenting or capturing, if you will, what has happened in the past, right? Because you can just write a book and just tell the stories like, here's what happened, and now here's where I am, or you could create a brand around here's where I'm going. And I'm serious when I mean that like this principle of create, don't capture applies to a lot of different things. Um, when I did that, when we wrote the book, towards that, and we started thinking about that, what is the future brand? Like, what are we trying to build? I didn't want people to. I had gotten put on stage for teaching a short form video framework, but I needed people to know that like I'm not just a short form video guy. Like I like short form video. It's great. It's a good format for creating content, but there's so much more to it than that. It's not just about short form video, but it's about creating content. It's not just about creating content, it's about getting a message out there. It's not just about getting a message out there and building a business. It's about actually making an impact on the world. And if I think about like what my mission is or my purpose for from now until the end of my life, or at least for the next, however many decades, it's bigger than that. It's more than just like how to create short form videos and build your brand online. It's about like actually building something that's meaningful and something that you care about, something that you want to do. And I wanted to make sure that that came through in the book. And I do think that it did, because there was an opportunity with this book to show people that like, here's where short form video fits into the bigger idea, right? On stage, I was talking about short form video. That's what they wanted. They wanted something tactical. They wanted to teach people a tip that they could use. But I needed people to see that like this thing right here fits into a bigger vision. And you need to understand what that bigger vision is, because ultimately, if you want to be successful with this, you want to build something meaningful and grow your business. It really is about understanding that bigger vision and really thinking about how the impact this is going to have on your life and on your people. And that was really ultimately that became the crux of the book, was that with the tactics sprinkled in so that you know
Mhm.
what to do and how to do it. But ultimately, if you come away from a book like this knowing how to make a short form video and that's it, I think it would have failed. But when you come away from this book, and when you guys get a chance to read this book, I think you will experience this. That you'll not only come away with it knowing what to do and how to do it, but you will come away from it with a different identity, and you will feel like a different person, and you will feel like you can become a different person, that you can become probably the person that you've always wanted to become, but you've just never had the permission to be it. And that's ultimately what it's all about.
Which is the movement you really wanted to start.
Yeah.
Really cool. All right. 2 minutes left. So two big things happening. You have on Friday your official launch. So hopefully when you guys registered for this event, it was the thank you. But Kimberly, can you drop the link in chat for everybody to if you haven't registered yet for Eric's launch on Friday? What time is it?
Friday, noon Mountain Time.
Yeah, 2
Um,
p.m. Eastern.
I'll give you the 60-second version. We're going to be, yes, we're going to be launching the book, but it's not just that. It's a 2-hour virtual event where I'm going to be talking through my entire framework. I'm going to be showing you what it means to be a creator, especially in today's day and age. I think what's really powerful about this book is even though I initially wrote the ideas a year and a half ago, they're actually more relevant to today's world than they were a year and a half ago. Some of the ideas in that book actually kind of didn't really connect with people back then, and now everybody's seeing that, like, oh, because of AI and everything that's going on, now everybody's seeing, like, oh, this is actually not just a nice to have, but this is crucial that you build your brand this way. And so I'm really excited to show people that. I'm going to be talking about AI a little bit at the event and about how being a creator is really the best safeguard against everything that's changing in our world, all this new technology and this AI,
Oh,
and what that means and how you can stay on top of it with that. So that's a big part of the event. I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about kind of walking through the framework in the book and the principles and how to apply them into your life. And then, of course, at the end of the event, I'll tell you about the book and where you can get one of the very first copies. We've done something really special and unique with it. That's all I'll say. But there's going to be an opportunity to get a version of this book that will be very limited and very unique and special. And I'm really excited to share that with you guys before the normal book comes out later. So
I've created a panic in Kimberly because I forgot to give her that link. Um, so sorry. What's the link, Eric? Or
what's
I,
I think I found it. I put it in
okay.
there. Tell me if that's right.
there we go. Yep.
Yes. Okay. There you go. Thank you. Good job, Kimberly. And then, well done. And then the other thing is, some of you are now wanting to write on your book. I know I've talked to several of you that are here. If you want to work with us on a book, we have a 5-week challenge coming up to go through the planning process that Eric and I did as well. So that's coming up. That link is, Kimberly, you want to drop that one? Bestsellerbreakthrough.com. Is that what it is? Um, but anyway, this has been really fun, Eric. And I cannot
Can I
wait for
just
Friday.
before we wrap up, I don't have to hop to another call, but I can be a minute or two late. Um, Becca will hold the room for me. Can I just say something about that real quick?
Yeah.
I want to just like go back and express like gratitude and appreciation and just like excitement around working with Nicole and her team. Like if you are somebody who has a book idea, who wants to write a book, who thinks that they might write a book at some point, or who has a business who hasn't thought about writing a book, but after listening to this, you're like, I think maybe I should do that. I cannot like understate how valuable I think working with Nicole and her team on this can be for somebody. In fact, I had someone reach out to me yesterday who said, they were like, "Hey, I heard about, your publisher that you worked with. It was, can you give me your experience working with them?" And I just responded, "It was literally amazing. Like Nicole's a genius. Don't even think about any other option. Like this is the direction to go." And I'm not saying that just to say that. Like I'm being real here. And I want you to know that like um not only is there a lot of power in writing a book, but there's a lot of power in writing a good book. And I hope that message has come across here because I wouldn't be where I am today and I wouldn't have had what happened if I had wrote a book. But it was writing a good book and working with somebody who understands what it means to write a good book, who cares about it, who's not just going to push you to write something with AI, who's going to help you write the stories that you need to write, who's going to help you write the ideas that you need to write, who's help you put the principles in it that need to be in it to write the right book, the right stories, the right ideas to help you to get to where you want to go. And I just think that, like, Nicole, in my mind, Nicole is the number one option for doing that. So the fact that she has this challenge coming up where she's going to be helping you write your idea and figure out what that book needs to be, because like she said, a lot of people write the wrong book. And that was literally the most valuable part of this whole experience, was not just getting the book printed. That's the part that gets exciting, right? But it was her sitting down with me and going, are you writing the right book? Is this what it needs to be? Let's think about your brand. Let's think about your future. Let's think about where you're going with this and make sure that you're writing this from the right perspective. You're writing the right book. That was the part that sold me 100% on Nicole, because she got it. She understood it in a way that nobody else did. And so the fact she's doing this challenge, and I don't even know how much it is, but whatever it is like completely a no-brainer for the value that you'll get from this. Even if you don't write your book yet, to have that idea, like, this will give you so much clarity on who you are and what your business is and what you're trying to do. And so I give it my full endorsement, like 100%. Go over there, join the challenge, be part of Nicole's thing. It's just the experience has been phenomenal working with her, and I know it will be for you too. So I just want to say that. Hope that's okay.
I'm tearing up. Thank you. I'm tearing up too, because I'm seeing the comments from our authors that have worked with us. Thank you. I love you all. It's so fun to be a creator and to get to work with other creators. And Eric, this has been a blast. Be sure you follow Eric on Instagram. He literally flew yesterday to California for the day to watch his book being printed, and he recorded the video, which was like, I can't wait. It was another idea, like the idea of standing on stage and like the video. It's so fun to work with a video guy. Like, we got the coolest video for this whole project. So if you go look at his Instagram highlights, his story, he's got some video footage of that. Come Friday, hang out with us for 2 hours. I can't wait, Eric. You're amazing. I'm so excited for you and everything that's happening. So cool. Thank you, everybody. Oh yeah. He does have a great community on school too. So anyway, all right, gang. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. I'll see you on the other Zoom. Everybody.
Thank you. See you guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.